Well, welcome everybody on this wonderful afternoon. It's officially afternoon. So, welcome to USDLA's Public Policy Week. We're delighted to have you here for this important conversation at the intersection of education, innovation, and policy. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to our Executive Director, Pat Casella.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone. We have a good crowd. We're almost at 50. We've got 40 right now. And to kick things off, we have Rob Robinson from the Hardy Group. He's going to get us going. We're going to have a nice open conversation today about AI related policies and some of the implications for compliance, that are going on. So I want to keep this conversation open, right? We'll all keep muted. I am going to monitor the chat window. So let's use the chat window. If you do have a question as we go along in the middle of the presentation, just throw that virtual hand up or wait. Sometimes you can if it's set up and you throw both your hands up real quick, it'll automatically put your hand up with the recognition. And I'll keep an eye on that. So I will do the moderation today. Before I turn it over to Rob, again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We used to do this in DC in a physical format several years ago, and we moved towards the virtual side. We kind of relaunched it. This is our third year now of doing it, relaunched in a virtual world. And again, our mission here is to really keep everybody in the know as to what is going on. And certainly, if anybody's been paying attention, there's a few things going on in the world of education, especially when you eliminate the Board of Education from the federal government. It has a tiny little impact that ripples down everywhere, across K through higher ed and everywhere in between, including home learning. So, keep it fluid, share what you know, learn from some of those on the call here that that have been learning from others, and Rob is going to guide us along here. So without further ado, Rob Robinson from the Hardy Group, also a USDLA board member.
Thanks, Pat. Uh, Glad to be here covering this topic. The first thing I want to say before I get into my presentation is that I'm not an expert on this. We are all learning at the same time about this rapidly changing set of factors around AI, the growth of AI, and how that is driving regulatory issues and policies. So I do want to be able to learn from you as well as hope share and give you a quick overview from what I see. Let me quickly share my screen. Put that into presentation mode. There we go. Hope everybody can see that. Again, so this is a quick kind of a scan, right, of the state of play in terms of regulation regarding AI, specifically teaching, learning, and assessment, and particularly from the higher ed point of view. Now, I want to make that clear because USDLA does represent a lot of sectors. My background is long time. So let me give you that real quick just so you can understand why I'm here yapping, and maybe next time you can be you yapping. So I was in public higher education for almost 30 years, most of that within the University of Texas system, various roles, helped lead some early online education activities out of the UT system administration. Spent the following 12 years in ed tech, so working for companies like Blackboard, Anthology, Civitas Learning. In the last couple of years, I've been with my longtime colleague, Darcy Hardy, at the Hardy Group. We've been out here being a small boutique consulting firm after we both got laid off Anthology when they were going through some consolidation. So that's kind of why I'm here and what we've been paying attention to. And in my role as a consultant, I do speak a lot about AI and its impact on teaching and learning in particular. But let's get started. We see it, right? I put the word panic and cross it out because it is borderline panic. A lot of times when we're talking to folks, particularly particularly faculty and instructional staff. There's a lot of fear around the use of AI. I've seen some fantastic innovations around the use of AI, but there is kind of a knee-jerk reaction. I've seen many places where they're just like, I don't want to deal with this. I just don't, just make this go away. And we can't. It's not going to happen. It is out there. I feel like it's incumbent on us as educators to help our students learn how to use this tool. They will be using it in their jobs. And so to say no, it's not a good state of play. But some of that thinking winds up crawling into some of the regulatory approaches that we see at various institutions. Regulation always lags behind innovation, right? We've always seen that. So the regulatory framework at the federal level, at the state level, at your institutional level is probably not built to respond to the rapid innovation around artificial intelligence. And trying to apply old rules to new technology can lead to some interesting situations. And we can wind up in a place where we need to rethink the entire policy framework because it's no longer responsive to the situation we have at hand. And we see risks, and I'll talk about some of the risks when policy lags practice. There is not a comprehensive AI law specifically for higher education. We have some old privacy standards that are not keeping up with this as well. We all know and love FERPA, right? We are all in fear of FERPA violations. It guides how we think about student privacy. FERPA is designed to, frankly, be a nuclear weapon. So the only responsiveness for FERPA violations is the loss of Title IV funding. That doesn't happen very often. And so there's no sub-stack around, oh, well, you can get your hands slapped. No, it's nothing or all. We have to pay attention to disability services, ADA 504, Title IV funding. The states are interestingly taking different approaches around how they want to regulate AI. Some states are like, we want to innovate, we're not touching it. Some states take a privacy standpoint where they want to make sure that the privacy of individuals is protected, and some are taking a consumer protection lens. Those state by state differences can come into conflict. But at the end of the day, your institution, if you work for an institution, is going to be the person holding the bag. I think we all know this, right? When it comes to AI, the first and foremost rule needs to be that humans need to be in the loop. It is tempting in an overworked environment, and I've seen examples of this, where we could say, I'm just going to push that off, or I'm going to have Claude or ChatGPT, automate this communications to the students. It's low stakes communications, just send it out. But without a human in the loop, at least having final say so, these systems do make mistakes. And we need to make sure that the humans are stay in the loop. Those mistakes can be benign or they can be pretty impactful. And so we need to make sure that we are staying accountable. There are always cautions when it comes to AI systems. And let me be clear, when I'm talking about AI in today's context, we're going to talk about, generative AI, right? The most powerful, far-reaching thing. But AI has been within our systems for many years. In many of our IT systems, they're already leveraging AI components. If you're using, Grammarly, that's AI, right? To help your writing. So we need to think about it is an all-encompassing term, but most of the fear is around the generative AI. And I'm hopeful that everybody on this call today is using some form of AI. It is wildly helpful, right? I use ChatGPT to help me organize this presentation. So can be wildly beneficial and can make us individually much more productive. Where it bumps up against the places that we want to have policies is when it's going to have an impact on how we provide teaching and learning, and particularly around assessments, about liability, about the institution. We need to be very aware of things like algorithmic bias, because it does exist, and we have to be sure of that. That's why transparency and equity need to be highly emphasized. And what you're going to see is when you go out and get, because we all have contracts with partners, right? These technology partners. Most of them are not going to be put themselves in a place where they're liable for something that goes wrong with their AI. We ultimately, as the other half of a contract, are going to accept some of that responsibility. So we need to be very cautious and ask some of the right questions when we start these relationships. There's a lot of over-promising out there, and there's a little bit of a Pandora's box on opening the beast here. So touching on this again, the different states have different standpoints when it comes to where their regulatory frameworks and desires are going. And there's a push-pull between and among states, but also between the federal government and some of the state approaches as well. It remains to be seen what's actually going to take place, right? So there's been some threats from the federal government to punish states that take an overly protective stance, even if they are in their thinking it's the right place to be. So it's not clear what's about to happen. Consumer protection is top of mind at a lot of places, and that tends to be the lens with which regulators are approaching this idea. But look, our regulators are not experts on anything. So we need to be willing and able to advocate for or against the impact of certain regulations on us as educators. All right, I left this in because there is some thinking about where does AI fall in terms of regular and substantive interaction. I'm sure you're all aware of the requirement for regular and substantive interaction. It is a law on the books. Whether or not it's going to be enforced, we don't really know. But that means we still have to be compliant with it. It is required to get your Title IV funds. It is predicated on interaction with an instructional human, right? And so some of the systems that we are bringing on board and helping offload some of our more onerous tasks, shall we say, in teaching and learning, may not qualify as regular and substantive, even if the student is showing engagement with the content. The RSI requirement is really about human interaction, access to the instructor. And so this is what we see, right? The use of chatbots, does that qualify? It's unclear, but it is something that we want to be thinking about. Having automated feedback for your discussion posting, right? And let me just say, as an aside, personally, as somebody who has taught online for a long time and worked with a lot of faculty and instructional designers, personally hate the post once, respond twice prompt as a way to judge interaction in an online course. There are better ways to do that. And the students hate it too. They'll tell you straight up they hate it. Right? So these tools are powerful. They can help us teach our students, but we have to work in partnership with them and not just defer to them as the instructional component of your course. You are the instructional component of the course if you're an instructor. And so we need to keep that in mind when we're thinking through RSI. And you need to be able to document that, by the way. Okay, let's talk about academic integrity. This is where I see a lot of concerns about the use of AI in terms of cheating, right? The AI to be used by students to cheat. Yes, they're doing it. There's no two ways about it. And that you're not going to put a stop to that. When I say this, when this falls back on policy, if your policy is, I forbid that, you need to rethink your policy. Given there's a lot of things that go into a student's decision to cheat. Some of that is the stakes with which we are setting our assessments. In other words, if we're doing midterm final, we need to rethink that. We need to have more frequent, lower stakes assessments that take the pressure off of the desire to leverage cheating tools, right? As another aside, if we are hopeful that we can find a tool that will detect the students' use of AI in their work, you can't. There are companies out there that claim that they can do it, and they don't. And when we rely on that or our intuition, when we say, I could tell simply by the strange use of language in this essay that student was using AI in a assessed written work, you have just taken on some serious liability because proving it is tough. And if you are wrong, you have brought liability onto the institution, right? That student can then sue the institution, particularly if it winds up in a failing grade, if you're engaging student judicial conduct groups, all that kind of stuff. So it gets super messy when we do that. There have been cases where several cases where neurodivergent students submitted written work that the faculty assessed as being written by AI. The faculty was wrong. Neurodivergent students have a tendency to write similar to the output of things like ChatGPT and Claude, Gemini, etc. So we have to be very cautious, right? There are cultural differences in terms of how the students' written work comes in. So we have to be careful. And what I advocate for is having a policy that at the institution level that allows variance among departments, faculty, but that does not demand an absolute ban on the use of AI by the students. Because when you do that, you're kind of setting yourself up in an adversarial position. And if you are relying on AI detection tools, you're on the losing side of an arms race. The speed with which the AI output is improving is way faster than the ability to detect. What do I suggest? I suggest the hard work of rethinking your assessment strategy. We don't want to hear that. Right? It's tough. I've been teaching this way for however many years, right? I still got my yellow legal pad with my course notes on it from 10 years ago. But it's time. It's time that we rethink some of our approaches to assessment. Be transparent with your students. I've seen some great innovations in terms of flipping the coin, if you will. Saying to a student in a written assessment, I require you to use whatever the current free version of ChatGPT is, because you don't want to have an equity issue by saying, the most expensive access to whatever tool you can get so the rich kids get it and the poor kids don't. I need you to use this particular tool. And what I want to see is your prompts, plural, iterative prompts, the tool's outputs, and how you would improve it. That's what I'm going to assess, right? Instead of just the output itself, which again, it's really hard to detect if there's any cheating going. I see there's some stuff in the chat. Is there anything I need to respond to, Pat?
Now I'm looking through it right now. There's a couple of things here. One is the interesting thing. AI is supposed to be a productivity improvement tool, right? Let's just dial it back a little bit. We're talking about research. I'm an engineering major. Back in the old days, I'll even date it back when you used to go to the library, you used to go through the indexing cards, you used to go take out a book, you used to go find it, research it, and add it to your paper. Then the internet came around, made it a little easier. You had to go and do a little more work, a little Google search, a little here and there. AI is just the next level of the productivity improvement tool. To your point, Rob, as long as you are saying where you found the information, you're validating the information, etc. This is all reason to embrace AI. At the end of the day, it's to make our lives easier, right? Make our jobs easier, all in all. And I think we've all got to keep that in mind, that this is a natural progression of where this is leading. Everybody thinks it's bad, it's plagiarism. It's not. As long as you're saying that, hey, this is where I found the information. It was all about me going and doing the research that you told me to go and do.
Right. And that gets to this point around students. They need to understand where the guardrails are. What is your position? My favorite analogy for this development, and let's be clear, this is only a couple of years old, right? Since this stuff has hit us, and we're slow to adapt because we work at slow to adapt institutions. But my favorite analog to this was in the Wayback Machine, and a few of us might be old enough to remember this, when calculators first came out. Most math instructors, their initial reaction was no, absolute ban. You cannot use one. I don't want to see one in my class. And ultimately, it took a little while. And I remember when someone would joke, "You think you're always going to have a calculator in your pocket?" Well, here's my phone. Yes, I do. But it took a while for math instruction to adapt to that. And frankly, what happened at the other side of that was better math instruction. It was less about rote manipulation and memorization, and then it was more about understanding concepts, how things were related to each other. And if you need a tool to help you do that, that's great. Let's not have you remember all these formulas, because we've got machines that can help you do that. Let's try to focus on why we're doing this. So I think we're in the same position, and we need to adapt to the existence of these tools. Yeah, we talked about this, right? So AI detection, just don't hang your hat on it, okay? Because bad things happen that way. There are companies out there that claim that they can do that, and those claims are not bore out.
I'm just reading Bruce's comment here, talking about, again, the key is really to the academic integrity is instructional redesign. I mean, really, it's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have to adapt to this new AI model. And we just talked about the whole analogy of the calculator to the phone, to your wrist phone, to everything. And now here it's AI. And what did we do over the years? We redesign the instructional format. That's what we do.
And it's hard, right? That's hard. It is. And we think about getting a bunch of faculty in a room and working through a project to rethink assessment norms, right? Or assessment approaches without stepping on academic freedom, but keep bearing in mind the goal of acknowledging the existence of this tool. And I think an overarching thought, as I said earlier, needs to be that we as educators need to acknowledge that our students will be using these tools in their life forever. We might be able to learn something from them about how best to use these tools. Oh, look at this, right? They are super powerful in terms of generating starting places, getting off top dead center, and trying to think through how do I approach a topic. It's great, but we need to acknowledge it. These tools are less good at doing math. They're less good at accurately bringing us scholarly resources. So, every time I've asked a tool like this to help me think through and create a bibliography, I got to go check every one of those things. And 70% are solid and 30% are like, well, that's completely made up. That doesn't exist at all. So again, keeping humans in the loop is going to be super important. And just be transparent and acknowledge when you're using these tools and what component, to what degree are we making sure that we can vouch for my digital assistance output, if you want to think about that way. So what does this mean, right? So alignment across syllabi and policies, that's going to be critical. I've seen many instances where institutions are have a policy on the books that prohibits innovation on a course by course basis, and we need to make sure. And this talk about some boring work. We need to do policy refresher at every institution and go back and review the entire policy framework to make sure that it's still responsive to the world we live in today. And one of my massive pet peeves is when I'm working with an institution, I'm down doing some focus work group or something, and somebody mentions the policy, and I say, well, why is that policy in place? And the response is some flavor of, it's always been there. Well, okay, let's stop, rethink that policy. Time to read it, figure out what problem it was trying to solve, and do we solve that problem? So, yeah, it's a living framework that we need to revisit on a frequent basis, and that frequency needs to go up in the modern world because of how rapidly these things are being deployed.
I saw a comment here, Rob, from Morris, just talking about, how do you redesign the dissertation as a PhD assessment? And I answered to him, I already know of several schools that are getting away from the dissertations altogether. Why? Because they recognize we're AI, what AI has right now, and it's just not worth trying. What do you do? Right?
Yeah.
So they're just doing away with the dissertations. They're saying they're unnecessary at this point in time.
I mean, there's still a role for a dissertation, right? So at a classic research institution, the output of that dissertation is you're adding to a body of knowledge, some level of work and research that had not been done before. And it stands on top of a synthesis of other research. Where the AI tool does a great job is helping you synthesize that previous work. And then how you frame your research moving forward. Let's talk about your results. There are many institutions out there for whom some form of a thesis or dissertation is just a check mark, right? And so in those instances, yeah, let's rethink what our capstone output is.
Yeah. It's funny, you say building, and you're right, building upon a body of knowledge. You will not compete with an AI engine for building upon a body of knowledge. That's just a no. They get smarter, right?
But the person can contribute to that body of knowledge, right?
They can. You're right.
That's the role.
You're right to the point of, they get smarter from what we feed to them. So in that respect, 100%.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the risks real fast, and keep throwing questions and comments into the chat. I'm going to open this up in a little bit because I'd like to learn from you guys as well. So one thing to be aware of when you're using AI tools is in most cases for the publicly available tools, you're actually contributing to how it's learning. In other words, if you're putting in some fairly confidential information and asking it to summarize it, it's no longer confidential. You have just submitted it into its learning model, and it can then use it. There are ways around that. There are institutions that are being proactive, and organizations and companies are being proactive by deploying their own boxed in LLM, such that it can feed everything from a company's point of view, but nothing external. And so it keeps a firewall around that. But just be aware that when you are leveraging some of these tools in just your daily life, most of us would say, who cares, right? It's going to figure out what my schedule is for next week. Everybody can see that. But there are limits to the way we want to think about this. Third-party processors, I think we all understand this deeply now. Our eyeballs are, our attention spans are a commodity. And all of these companies want to tweak their algorithms such that we spend more time on their content so they can set more ad rates. So think of yourself as being algorithm every day, and just let's keep some level of awareness up of that. When we're leveraging contracted tools at our institution, whoever's responsible for that contract for your data security, they need to understand data retention policies at those tools. How are they acquiring information about us? Have we asked a third-party system to assess student learning? What then, how then do we defend a grade grievance, right? So we need to think about how, what these companies are doing with the data downstream, how long they're going to keep it, how do they purge it, those kind of things. Are they free to sell the data or the spun up version of your data, if you will, to other folks? And at the end of the day, you and your institution are ultimately responsible for this. This is a topic I've spent a lot of time thinking about, writing about. So for proctoring solutions, for AI is used in proctoring solutions, and it can be used very, very well in proctoring solutions. But it can't be the only level of detection used in a proctoring tool. Again, humans need to be in the loop. The AI should not be making a final call as to, hey, I saw you cheat. It needs to set maybe a flag that somebody then goes and reviews. There are legitimate privacy concerns around some proctoring services. This really exploded during the pandemic when everybody was at home and we wanted to continue teaching and learning, and we needed to assess. So there were lots of proctoring companies that came onto the scene. They, to a greater or lesser extent, can be accusatory or helpful. If what you don't want to have is a relationship in which you start with the assumption that the student is going to cheat, right? You want to remove the conditions under which the student might have the opportunity to cheat versus trying to be, aha, I got you. It's like, I want to help you learn. This is why I want you to learn. This is how we're going to assess your learning. I need your help in doing that. That's a much better space to be than having a set of tools. Many of the proctoring solutions have some form of a room scan, right? So I need to look around your room to make sure there's no one else in there, that they're not a secondary screen. That's legitimate. What is concerning for many students is that I've just had an unknown third party looking inside my house, right? That is a privacy concern. There are ways around that, but if you're using a proctoring service, these are some of the conversations that I want you to have. Are we surveilling our students? 100% yes, we are surveilling our students. We've always surveilled our students. Used to be we only did it in classroom. Now we're doing it inside whatever tools we're using to help their learning, like an LMS. So we need to be open about that, right? We need to be able to point to a set of policies that protects their privacy, a set of policies that indicates we're not keeping that data. We're not showing any PII type of data. We might aggregate it to discover trends. The positive side of all of that are things like the ability to discover things like muddy point analysis, right? So if all of my students completely flamed out in the third week and my module was X, I need to rethink how I'm presenting X. And I never knew that until I saw it in the data that I have from our systems, right? So again, openness, honesty, don't try to hide the fact that we're doing some of this. Talk about how decisions were made regarding some of these tools. I would state, having worked at institutions for a long time, that most of us don't have any vision into how some of these tools were selected, other than price. And somebody took somebody out for a nice dinner. But that's we need to have that conversation. We need to understand all of these spill-on risks. All right, I think we've touched on this. Algorithmic bias is real. It is in the early days of some of these type of tools, there were systems around that said that they could predict high crime areas policing, right? And they did that by looking at arrest records and arrest locations. And what it did was double down sending cops to the worst parts of town, tend to be the black and brown parts of town, right? Because that's where the cops had focus. That's where most of the arrests were. It simply doubled down on an existing bias in their data. We want to be clear that we want to stay away from that as well, as much as possible. And to understand that there are potential cultural biases in here as well. So think through some of these things. There's a great book here. I don't know if you can see it, called Weapons of Math Destruction. Talks a lot about the perils of algorithmic bias, etc. And again, I've said this 6 times now, but at the end of the day, it's the institution's responsibility. I think we've touched on that. All right, another plea for a policy at your institution. If it doesn't exist, let's start agitating for one. If people are relying on an old policy that doesn't actually deal with AI, it's time to have that conversation. Here's a little irony. So my colleague Darcy and I, when we worked at Anthology, we did a lot of thought leadership work. We produced a white paper around institutional AI policy. They published it the day after we were let go, but it's still out there and you can find it. And it's got a good framework for approaching how we want to have these conversations at our institution. Make sure we get the right stakeholders in the room, including students, when we're talking through some of these policies. The accreditors don't know what to do about this either, but they want to see that you are being responsive. That's the most succinct way that I can put that. They're not going to be turning a blind eye, but they also don't have a whole lot to say, as far as I know. You guys can school me on this, as to what suggested institutional position should be vis-a-vis AI. I want to get some conversations. So, yeah, wood blank bands. Okay, here we go. That's my summary. I'm sticking to it. But let's open it up. Anything in the chat, feel free also to just come off mute if you want to have a conversation. And I will stop sharing so I can see the screens.
We got some hands up.
Good.
I'll go through. I'm going to hit Karen up first. Karen Whitehurst.
Hi, how are you? I found this very, very interesting, so I appreciate the workshop today. I just wanted to make a comment about AI usage in the classroom. So,
Yeah.
one of the instructional policies, we do have instructional policies. I'm in two institutions, higher and secondary, um, and both have policies. But one of the things that I found helpful as far as instructional is I do have an AI disclosure. So I do send that to students. I make them well aware of it. If I send this to you, just fill it out and it starts a conversation. So I think I found that one of the most important things is a conversation with the student. And you find out lots in doing that. And it helps you make a better decision. You don't ever want to come out and say, hey, none of this is yours,
Right.
or some of this is yours.
Right.
But the conversation is super important, I find, and it helps the relationship with the student. It helps you make a more informed decision. And in doing that, I find that the student instructor relationship is better and you have less problems.
I like that approach a lot. And I don't think we should ever discount approaches like uh, an academic integrity, um, uh, you know, um, on dishonesty policy, right? Or uh, an honor policy, right? As a way to
Agreed.
establish a foundation. And your point is well taken about the need for attribution as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to ban this, but I want to know when you're using it. And let's talk about how we might do better in using it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm seeing one here from Russ. Hey, Russ, how you doing? Too
Russ,
noisy here to talk. What policies or practices have you seen to overcome the digital divide and economic barriers to assure students have equal access to the same level of AI tools? It's a great question.
yeah, Russ and I touched on this a little bit earlier. The best thing I've seen is whatever the current free version is of something like ChatGPT, that's the version that you're going to require students to use, right? Because they are frozen in time. They stop learning at a certain amount, right? So if somebody has access to the greatest, you know, premium version of Claude, that's going to put them in a different position than if they're leveraging, you know, whatever came with whatever tool they got. So it is a tricky one. I think we need to acknowledge that the potential for economic inequity exists, and
That's
at
right.
least address it as best we can.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, the inequity, it could be big,
Yeah.
right? Because I could see just like the freeware Zoom started to take off, and then somebody got the paid version of it, and then there were other versions that did other things and more features.
Yeah.
I
Now
think you're going to see
I've
the
seen
same thing with AI.
institutions that have engaged in a institution-wide site license with Microsoft, and then you require all the students who are covered by that license to use that version, right? That is one way to approach it, but that requires an institutional commitment.
Yeah, and it could become a competitive advantage or a competitive tool for educational institutions down the road. And, you're nowadays you're a student, you're comparing all the different features, flexibility. I think the key is going to be flexibility, not locked into just one tool. And hopefully, there's some standard at some point in time that says, here's the bare basic minimum that, Rob, we talk about accreditation, and this hasn't even, trickled into the conversation too much yet. But, at some point in time, I would imagine there is going to be some level of AI tool bare minimum that you're probably going to need.
Yeah. Elizabeth.
Hi. Oh my gosh, this webinar is so timely for me because in a couple weeks I'm giving yet another presentation to our faculty. I'm with the University of Phoenix, and I adopted AI before anybody even knew it existed. I thought it was the best thing ever. Um, I just wanted to share that we did do a comprehensive AI policy about a year and a half ago, And then about I don't know, maybe 5 months ago, we put out an entirely new and comprehensive and detailed process for all the instructors. And the guidance is just amazing because I feel like instructors, some were floundering. Like I felt confident with what I was doing, but you had some instructors who, for whatever reason, it was just overwhelming to them, just the thought of students are using this incorrectly. And our new guidance includes a blanket AI disclosure for instructors to share. And I think most importantly, to speaking to your earlier comments about being careful of accusing people and going down that road, we put out a bunch of announcements, private messaging language for instructors to use and to escalate, and started a conversation and turn that into ultimately a coaching situation to where it just increases. The conversation gets a little bit more intense if a student doesn't respond and ignores you. And ultimately, we did implement one thing, an informal coaching form, to where if I'm coaching a student for a whole course and there's active dialogue, but still the student, for whatever reason, I go, you know what, this student's not doing the right thing and refuses to get on board with the acceptable use. There's an informal coaching form, which is super easy to fill out electronically. And now that goes on file. So when the student gets to, say, 4 courses down the road, and they have a litany of these coaching forms, then there's one more escalation. So there's lots of safety nets in place to avoid what we all fear, a student using AI to get an entire degree. And I think instructors, it has really helped push the narrative to where students are getting a uniform message from every instructor.
I love that. That's a good comprehensive approach, and thoughtful as well, with a lot of appropriate, what I'll call off ramps, right? So I think that's great, and I think it leads to something. I was scanning the comments here. Bruce had a comment about fluency, AI fluency, right? So that's something I talk a lot about, and I think it gets to a heart of where some of our sort of semi panic is coming from. For a lot of folks, is that they don't want to be shown up as being, I don't know how to use these tools and it's freaking me out, but my students do. So having the ability, I've seen institutions do like open labs, right? To have a space where faculty can come in and play with stuff under the eye of people that can kind of guide them, right? So start to open their eyes to what the potentials are. And have conversations with instructional design type folks around here's how to build some of this in. But this idea of moving from a literacy to a fluency is some language I use quite a lot. And we all need to get more fluent in the use of these tools, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and how we can leverage those. So thank you, Bruce, for that.
Yeah, you're right, Robin, on that one. Just to add, there is that fear from any instructor that the student knows more than them, right? And with the world of
100%.
AI, it happens it's getting to be worse. I think AI is just adding to that. There are lots of tools out there, and these kids are, they're coming into school, especially when you talk higher ed, they're coming in already knowing how to use some of these tools at the K level, K-12 level.
And I think the starting approach is like, look, I mean, I know faculty, instructors, right? They are time impoverished, right? They don't have any free time. And so the idea of adding another training component onto something that they're already having to do doesn't sound that great to them. But I think the way we can provide some incentives around this is to help them think through where these tools can give them time back, because they absolutely can.
What other question? Yeah, what else do we have? There is a link I'm going to share. Just give me a second to find it here.
Well, as we're wrapping up, I just want to say thank you to everybody for playing along. I always learn when I can engage with smart people, so I appreciate it. all your time today. I hope that you will stay tuned for the rest of Policy Week. We've got sessions this afternoon, and we've got sessions tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon, etc. So stay tuned, follow up. Look at our website to see what sessions are out there. And I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Nice job, Rob. Hey, I just threw a link in there, and that is a link to Tennessee State University AI. They have an AI group, a smart group, and they go around and evaluate a lot of AI tools. It's not all inclusive, but it is actually a pretty good starting point if you're looking at, what are some of the tools that are being used right now especially in higher education. So take a look at that link. I just put that in the chat window. And then if anybody is considering going to the USDLA conference, we are in Cleveland this year. And we are doing a discount. There's the code to use, USDLA-web-10, get you 10% discount. We know that education is in a little bit of chaos, and especially on conferences, and we're seeing it as well. So, we've kept our rates unchanged from last year, doing group discounts. If you've got a school that has 10 or more instructors, we've got a blanket price, $24.95 to bring everyone. We're starting to see that as a common trend. We wanted to follow suit with that. And these are some more of the topics that you're going to learn about at that conference. So that's the week of June 22nd, and we will be at the Marriott Cleveland downtown at Key Tower.
And I'll be there, so come join me and we'll share a drink.
Awesomeness. Alex, you want to add anything to close?
Yes, so before we end, I just want to thank all of you it was a great turnout and engaging conversation and questions. Just wanted to let you know that we have another session this afternoon at 3 p.m. about SARA. And we have other sessions the rest of the week. I've put our link in the chat. Please register. We look forward to seeing you. We have a really interesting lineup. There's more on AI policy for language learning this week. There's a session on futures literacy. We have another session on the effects of administrative changes at the federal level. And we also have a state chapter public policy panel on Friday. So look forward to seeing your names and your faces in this coming week. And thanks again.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
everybody.
much.
Thank you.